wanted to make a quick video about my Frusciante Style rig here, which I just finally kind of completed. Got this micro amp clone. It's a Joyo pedal. And I wanted to make this video because I have a method for controlling the volume jumps that I haven't seen anyone doing. You can do it with this method without having an always-on pedal. That'll mess with your tone. And so the way that I do it is that I get all the volume from the amp. So the amp that I'm using will be at a very low volume, and then I'll use the volume from the pedals to control the volume. And that way, if you're using like a booster compressor, if you're using your clean pedal, there won't be a volume jump if you switch to a distortion pedal that's maxed out. Or there won't be as much of a volume jump if you go to a voice or a distortion pedal or whatever that's maxed out, because this will have the same output as that. Or if I was using a compressor and I had the volume all the way up, if it has enough output, then there'll be no volume jump, or there'll be a minimized volume jump. And so I'll just get in the pedals really quick. So this is WH10 Fuzzrite micro amp, and then this JHS distortion I'm just using as a bridge between the DS2 and the Fuzzrite. I think it inverts phase or whatever. I don't really understand that, but without this pedal on, the distortion, you can run it with the distortion too. On the low gain mode, it flips the phase or whatever. It does something on the low gain mode that allows you to use these two together without it sounding really bad. And also with the volume, so with the distortion off, it's completely transparent and doesn't do anything, pretty much. But you can also roll back the volume, and then it'll kill some of the noise. But and the JHS distortion is just kind of a placeholder, and I use it as, placement for the big muff or whatever, if I want to stack with the DS2, or sometimes you'd use other distortion pedals. And it's just so really nice, transparent. But if you're watching this video, you know what all the other stuff does. And then right now I'm using an amp, but I'm using a Blackstar amp. It's not great, but it sounds really good, and it can do this. So the EQ, this side's Fender, this side's Marshall. The nice thing is you can put it right in between those two, which is where Frusciante's tone lies. It's not, he uses a Marshall amp a lot of the time, but he has a lot of treble, a lot of low end, so it ends up sounding like a Fender amp. And then I'm also going to make a video showing how you can use the amp modelers, which you'll get a much more accurate tone. But right now I'm just using the amp because that's what I'm using right now to play. And then I'm just going to play a few things to show you how it sounds. And then just these 5 pedals will take you, without excluding any time effects that you used, because I don't really use a lot of those. And if I am going to use them, I'm going to use with the amp modeler, because you can put them after the amp, and it's like having an effects loop. But just with these 5 pedals, you can go all the way from Californication to Stadium Arcadium and get all those tones, all the fuzz tones, all the clean tones, without using a compressor or a CU1 preamp. But I eventually would like to get, a CU1 preamp. And I used to use a lot of compression, and I thought that the compressor was really the key to getting that clean tone. But it didn't quite sound right. It was making a lot of noise, especially with the amp modelers. So I moved away from that, and I figured out how to use, the clean boost to get the amp or the modeler to compress and clip, and basically have the same thing. So I'm just going to play a few things really quick and show you how I can take it to all those different eras just with these few pedals without even changing the dials really. So that's what it sounds like. That's the volume level without any pedals. forgot to mention is you will usually use this kind of in place of an overdrive, or you can change the settings on this, turn it to the high gate mode, use it as an overdrive. So there's a lot of different things you can do, kind of like how you can use that as a replacement for the Big Muff or whatever. But I have a Big Muff clone coming and a few other things. I just wanted to make this video while things are still simple. And another thing I forgot to mention is if you have that on and then turn on the DS2, you're going to get a volume jump. But if you turn your boost off and then turn on, there's not as much of a volume jump. And then like if I was playing late at night, with an amp modeler, just turn the volume down on this a little bit, and that'll solve it. Or you can run it through the Fuzzrite, which has a low output, solve a lot of that. And then you are going to get volume jumps if you're stacking pedals into this. If you have the boost all the way up, which is how it would usually. I mean, an original one would have that boost, but you can just roll that back if you want. And then also the depth, at least during Stadium Arcadium, he is about halfway, kind of in Crybaby Land. I used to play it with the depth all the way up, but if you want like a really accurate tone, you're actually going to want to roll it back. Another thing that will help is if you're playing like funk lines, and you're doing a lot of muted stuff where you don't want any buzz or any noise. If you have the depth up, when you go toe down, it's going to create a lot of noise. If you turn the depth back, you're going to lose a lot of noise. And I'm actually going to play a little funky stuff really quick, just because I'm here. Demonstrate that. Oh, and then the really cool thing about the Fuzzrite is you can play, it's so quiet that you can play funk with it. And it won't, even with the wah pedal, even with the boost pretty much all the way up, I'm going to roll back a little bit. You can play funk, actually I'm going to turn it back up because of the low output, but you can play funk stuff with, a full fuzz tone, which sounds really cool. And that's how I was getting the sort of, the London intro tone with the wah instead of using, a high gain amp or whatever he used. So that about does it. And for a lot of these pedals, there's no cheap alternative. If you want if you want the same circuit, but I'll make another video showing alternatives you can do that are cheap, and you're not going to get the same sound, but it's going to sound pretty similar, depending on what you're using it for. But there's pretty much no such thing as a DS2 clone that's affordable. Like Behringer has one, but it's discontinued, so it's expensive. Have never seen a cheap Fuzzrite. This is the cheapest Fuzzrite clone I could find, and Wilson Effects is great. These are both Wilson Effects. This was one of my first pedals, and I wanted a DS2, but I went to a store stupidly to buy it, and they didn't have a DS2. So now I get stuff online now, and I can't speak highly enough of this. So if you're on a budget, do some research, and I'm gonna make a video about getting us on a budget. But this is like a $500+ board, Which, for some people that's a cheap board. 'Cause some people have $1,000 boards, but if you're somebody who's newer like me, this took me like a year to build and figure everything out and be able to afford it all. And if you're a newer person that's watching this, if it gets any views, which probably not, but if you're a newer person that's watching this and is trying to figure out what pedals they need, probably not going to be able to afford all this, or you're not going to want to spend the money if you're newer into guitar. But I just wanted to show you, mainly because of the volume jump thing, because it took me a long time to figure out the volume thing. I would always have my amps up loud, and then I'd have to roll the level back on the distortions. I just got this, so I was using this one. I'd have to roll the level back here, way back, but then it would mess with the tone. And whenever you're using a distortion fuzz, and another thing that's really important for getting that tone is to boost the play through a clean amp. Let me just go through the settings here really quick. So this is on the overdrive channel, but the gain is pretty much all the way down, and it's perfectly clean. But you turn this on, you're just barely getting a little bit of distortion. You can't really hear it through the open strings, but the settings you want on your amp are very quiet, very low, no gain at all. And then you come back over here, and this is what's really important to getting that tone, is you're boosting your signal so that your tubes or your modelers, which sound great, they clip the exact same way. You don't need a tube amp. Can't speak highly enough of those. Just buy them. They're $40. But you will need a monitor for that. But or just speaker. I would, recommend a monitor. But anyway, that's really important, is to not use any overdrive coming from your amp and get everything from your pedals. And yeah, that's about it. And people say, oh, you need the C1 preamp, you need all these things to get that tone. You don't. You can figure out how to do it. If it's not about getting it exact, but there's a lot of things. I'll just go over what I think is most important. I used to think the compressor was most important. I don't think that anymore. And the way that he deals with the volume jumps, and going back to that, is he had, a badass huge studio compressor, even when he was playing live backstage, and that wasn't used as an effect like a Dynacomp would be. He wasn't using it. He was using it to just keep the volume level. The engineers were, and none of us have. Even the guys who, go out and buy all the vintage gear, spend hundreds of thousands trying to recreate, or tens of thousands trying to recreate his rig. Even they don't have that studio compressor. So we need to find a different way. Even those guys have to find a different way to deal with that. But I used to think the compressor is most important. It's not. Compressor is not the most important. In my opinion, it just depends what you're going for. Having something that can boost your signal, like a like I was using this little Boss compressor clone. It has the tone and level are really important, because you can add back a lot of high end, and the level, it works as a great boost, but you can't be stacked with other pedals. There's a lot of problems with it. So if you're going for the clean tone, most important is a nice boost pedal and a proper amp or amp modeler. But for lead tone, in my opinion, the most important is specifically this pedal. Because I have a V3 and it broke multiple times, and I'm just done with it. And I had to replace it. I'll go over the other thing I replaced it with. I'll just show really quick. It's this Behringer optical watch. It does a great job because it has a gain boost, but it doesn't have the same clean tone. But as far as lead, most important pedal, because I used this as a DS2 replacement for a long time. Worked great. It's not, the DS2 is better. If I agree with that, but this is the most important if you want that live tone, if you want to sound. But I'm really into wah. That's my thing. So for somebody else, I guess I'll go with the least important pedal on this board is the fuzz rate. You don't need a fuzz rate. I only still have it on the board, or I'm only going to still have it on the board